Heyo, by the time I actually post this, it's going to be nearly a month since I made a video about a creator who posts polls, sometimes long text posts on their community tab, and other times re-upload short-form content from their TikTok. But I know there's at least one person that won't mind that I'm still talking about this. The day of, he responded to my video by posting a community post addressing my post by basically saying that I got him all wrong, and goes on to talk about the things that he felt I got wrong, but ended it out by telling his audience that I did overall a pretty good job, and encouraged people to watch my video, and said that he'd be happy to come onto my channel and talk about all the topics I brought up. I rejected his request to come on my channel, but some people didn't understand why, because this specific post sounded nice enough, so they concluded that maybe I'm just not open to conversation. Well, in my defense, if I were to view his post objectively without even including the condescending comments about channel sizes and views he was making in my comment section, this reads as something that's trying to look gracious to his audience, but is still fundamentally controlling and condescending. Even when he was trying to compliment my video, he doesn't specify what he thought was good, but he does specify what he thought was bad, meaning that his compliments were shallow. If I were to give an actual term for it, it'd most likely be called asymmetric feedback, or more commonly known online as nice guy behavior, where the vague praise provides plausible deniability where he gets to say I was nice to her, while the specific criticism undermines my credibility in concrete ways. In his specific case, he started off with a small but vague compliment that would create a small sense of reciprocity to make the person more likely to comply with a larger request, but he unfortunately didn't even do the compliments right because they were always backhanded. He just minimally praises the fact that I surprisingly made a watchable video, but he doesn't praise the actual content or my points. And again, he didn't have to compliment me, but it's more polite to make it less obvious that you don't mean those compliments, so you don't come off like someone who'd manipulate people by giving them false validation. When he tells his audience to watch the video, comment their thoughts, and subscribe so she can get this silver play button, I saw this as completely patronizing. If this played out like he expected, where his audience watched my video and accepted his excuse where half of them didn't address my points, then I would have gotten mobbed by his audience defending him, arguing with me, and him looking like a sweet, innocent guy that just wants to help a small creator grow. You wanna know how I know that? Because that's what happened to the other creator that I talked about in that very video. I talked about a creator who got called out in his community post tab, where everyone missed her point and brigades her for something that she wasn't arguing for. He also acknowledges that part of the video where my point was that he and the part of his audience that still actively like him don't listen to people, despite claiming that he's for conversations. But he just says, I'll happily ask posts about opinions on transgender athletes if someone would date an autistic person, and yeah, I'll do binary polls on gender because I believe men and women aren't the same, and on things like dating, it's valuable to ask both views. Or more accurately, I wasn't listening to your point, so I'm focusing on something that you explicitly said was a side tangent and argue against the straw man. To basically TLDR my entire video, I brought up how his support on AI supports the idea that he's only in it for online validation, how giving broad advice to his audience to not go to college is dangerous because he doesn't internalize the fact that he was in a very privileged position set by his dad who went to college, and how seeing a little to no difference from a 34-year-old and an 18-year-old in, I assume, a sexual sense since he isn't interested in romance, is not only inaccurate to how aging and maturity actually works, but also pretty objectifying, and I show all the posts and comments of what he says to show why I believe for what I do for each one. But in each of his sections responses to my points, he just reiterates the same points that were in the original post that led me to come to that conclusion in the first place. The only one that didn't was his response to the fact that his comments were turned off on a certain poll, because he said that it was a glitch and he didn't know what happened. Personally, I don't believe that excuse in the slightest, because when people were calling him out before, he didn't reply to those comments correcting him despite his insatiable urge to reply to multiple comments that questioned or mentioned him. Plus, he also ignored my original assumed solution option to delete it and repost it if something went wrong. Despite my subjective opinion being that this community post was a mess and I sort of doubted that anybody cared enough, I got various comments implying that they came from that post. One of them asking, why are people so damn offended by controversial opinions? Can you not just either not read it or read it and deal with it? He continues to say that he's not defending him or anyone else, but he's just asking a question. I got a lot of comments like this one that were basically along the same lines of, why do you care? If I were to assume that these people were asking in good faith and not being purposefully dense, I'd say that the reason why people get upset over controversial opinions is because certain opinions can affect someone's life and well-being. That's just the generic reason though, since there are many more specific reasons why people get offended at things. But that generic reason could apply to the same reason why he got offended at my video too. I wouldn't say that I was necessarily offended at the things he posted publicly, but when you post something controversial to the public, you should expect the public to react accordingly. And along with that expectation, you should also be prepared for when people don't like what you post. Despite what he thinks, I truly believe that there's nothing wrong with posting polls even if I have specific nitpicks about them, because the desire to always learn more and gaining different viewpoints is always a good thing, but it's naive to post your opinions alongside them and believe that everyone will just accept the excuse you're in the wrong because you have a reactive opinion that doesn't paint me in a positive light to my opinion that I posted publicly. Maybe some people will, but I have reason to believe that it won't be the majority. So even though I vented to my audience comments about him for a while, I wasn't going to give myself the responsibility to set it up, record him talking over me and ignoring whatever I say for however long, shorten it to be my specific channel friendly, and pray to the gods that whatever I do pleases him enough to call me mature, because there is no world where I would consider that to be worth it. I made a relatively short and temporary post that'd be the YouTube equivalent to an Instagram story that I would not be collabing with him. I didn't know this until later, but he also clarified that it wouldn't be a collab, it'd be an interview, which confirms my assumption that I have to do all the work making the actual video while he just talks at me. Or even better yet, he works on the video on his own channel where I just sit there while he talks at me. Both sounds torturous, so I'm still very happy with my response being no. After my rejection post, it seemed like the curtains fell because he not only posted another community post, but also nearly a 20-minute long video deep diving into my video and insulting me in the process. But we'll get to that in a bit. In the community post, he didn't really address anything new, but instead said that me declining his offer for me to interview him showed him the mental illnesses and wussiness of all younger people. Remember when he said that there wasn't any gap between an 18-year-old and a 34-year-old? Do you think it's time to look back and laugh yet? He says that I barely researched and did a pretty bad job explaining my case, and now that I'm being challenged, he believes that I'm getting all offended because I just can't handle the idea that I'm wrong. Do you see what I mean when I said that his compliments on the first post felt empty because he didn't specify what he was talking about? Some people said that they felt like this post was hypocritical to the first one since he complimented my video first. So why is he switching up now that I rejected his request? Well, because he technically wasn't being hypocritical, because he never actually complimented the actual content, and thus giving him the room to say this chick trashed me in a video, got everything wrong, and is honestly pretty immature, without having to backtrack on anything he actually said. It gets a little confusing after that, but I think he's upset that I'm refusing to talk to him privately even though he claims that he's just asking for a conversation, but I'm still treating it like an unreasonable demand of my time. Meanwhile, he claims that I call what I do journalism by asking questions, but he thinks it's just giving really poorly thought out opinions. He uses the word journalism and journalist a couple times when he's referring to me, but I'm not sure why, because I'm a commentary YouTuber, not a journalist, and I don't have to be a journalist to explain why I don't like something, and even if I was bound by journalistic ethics, real journalists don't have to give everyone they criticize an interview. They quote them, they investigate, and they report their findings, which I guess I technically did, but still, being a journalist doesn't mean they have to platform everyone they cover. I really don't understand why he feels like he needs my platform that he also repeatedly refers to as small and unimportant when he already has a platform with over 1 million followers where he can share his grievances, and he has. A couple of hours after posting that community post response to my no I don't want to collab, he published a video titled Dear Girl Who Called Me Despicable. Already off to a bad start because that's not the word I used, and the word he used doesn't even mean the same thing to what I said, but we don't judge YouTube videos by their titles. If we're being extremely generous, it was good that he didn't completely ignore my video. It was made clear that he indeed watched it and acknowledged very specific points I made while trying to provide his perspective. None of it was in good faith, but it's at least the bare minimum in a response type video. I was also sort of satisfied to see that he admitted to having some privilege in relation to his opinion on college, but immediately minimizes it by saying that his dad reluctantly helped him and that the inheritance wasn't that significant. Gee, I wonder why I was reluctant. I was also interested with how he addressed him not caring about being the other man, since he did add new context that I didn't know, but like I said in the original video, that was only one instance that he's choosing to now play victim in, and he implied in his comment that he's been the other man multiple times, and he doesn't address why he's okay with being the other man, despite him seeming like he knows it's a bad thing if he's willing to play victim to it. At the beginning of this video, he says that I didn't really do that great of a job at talking. I might have given some credit to the not great at talking bit since he clearly didn't understand most of what I said, and I can agree that I can make more of my videos more accessible to people. I'd say that's a valid critique, but I also know that's not actually what he meant. If we're judging by the numbers, since that's what he likes to go off of, the majority of people who engage with my videos seem to have understood it and even backed me up. Unless he's only paying attention to the minority numbers again, I don't know where he's drawing these conclusions from. He said that I lied about calling him the other man because I guess he forgot that he objectively self-admitted that he's the guy that women cheat on their boyfriends and in one case their husbands with, but then later says that I called him cis and a No, I didn't. Neither of those, actually. If you opened up the transcript of that video and search up for or even nothing comes up. And if you search up for the word cis, the only things that come up in the transcript is when I was praising him for recognizing that he's a narcissist, which he himself has called himself, and then when I neutrally referred to the athletes that outperformed a transphobic athlete that believes in banning trans people from sports. It was astounding that he dwelled on the possibility that I was referring to him when I said the word cis, since he also made both a poll with a pinned comment and also an entirely separate community post where he also invalidates non-binary people. Shocking. He apparently also thinks that I'm upset because he won't date trans people.
She also got angry at me here when I complained about some transgender woman who messaged me, and then I asked for a voice message realizing she was transgender, and I said no. Yeah, I'm going to stand for that. I'm not going to date somebody who has a mangled with dick that has been reconverted to look like a I will not date someone doing that. I'm sorry. I'm pro-transgender. I want all the support in the world for them. Personally, I will not date a transgender woman, and I think 99% of people.
In the video he's replying to, can you guess what I explicitly said? Like, if you don't want to date a person with autism, who cares? It's their life. Just like if you don't want to date a person who's trans, who cares? It's their life. And while yes, that's true, that was also not her point. Her point was that she felt like the poll was insensitive to people with autism because the way that poll guy framed the poll made it seem like he was dehumanizing autistic people by using their existence to just make a fun little poll. But people in her comments keep trying to defend poll guy without engaging with her points, which ironically proves her point. He harbors an audience that doesn't listen to people and instead blames those same people when they call out possibly harmful behavior. There is genuinely no way that he watched the video with sound or automated captions on, because not only did he ignore me spelling out her point where she says that she doesn't care about who he dates, but he needs to be more sensitive with how he phrases things because the way he phrases things makes it sound dehumanizing. But he also ignores my point where I say that he pretends to want conversations but in reality cannot take accountability or even stay on topic, and his response to that is by shifting the topic to be about dating trans people and referring to their genitalia as mangled. I'm sure that's not completely transphobic and dehumanizing. I was going to say that it's shameful that he made the same mistake twice after 2 years, but I feel like at this point it's a choice. I think the worst part of this video was that throughout the video he repeatedly insinuates that I'm mentally ill and sometimes even outright says it. Right after he said that I acted immature, he says, quote,
I don't want to sound mean, but she kind of strikes me as the girl who got bullied in 7th grade because she wanted to be the bully, but she wasn't very good at it. And now she's trying to pass herself off as maybe some sort of goth emo chick. And at the same time, she just kind of strikes me as the person who might be a little bit on the antidepressants and then brag about it or something. It's cruel, but it's true. It's true. Come on.
I think I would get so slimed the fuck out if I ever called my e-girl poser goth or emo, but still, that was so genuinely horrendous that it got turned into a TikTok edit. Also, he said that I was on antidepressants in the community post before he had made this video, and in between the time that he had posted this video and that community post, I posted on my story that I was in a crash out competition and I'm fucking losing, and that I'd never be able to show my face at the antidepressant convention again. That's not a real thing because I was obviously just joking. I'm not on any medication, and even if I was, having depression doesn't mean that anything I say is bonkers, thus invalid. But I think he thought that was me admitting that I'm on antidepressants, which is where the brag about it assumption came from. If it wasn't, then I assume that the cruel claim was unfounded. Throughout his 19-minute video, there are over 10 instances of him bitterly inviting me to talk to him, to ask him questions, and or bring him on my channel in between all the times he calls me stupid and mentally ill. If I said no because I saw that he didn't listen to me, I have no idea why he would think that I would say yes after attacking my character, integrity, mental health, and for some reason my trans peers. What's very interesting about this too was that one of my core criticisms is his stated willingness to pursue barely legal teenagers despite the obvious power imbalance with him being 30 years old. I couldn't help but notice that when he describes me, a young feminine person who's nearly 10 years younger than him, he repeatedly refuses to use my name or any neutral identifier besides some girl because he implies that I need to earn it, and describes me as an immature childish 7th grader. And this was after I rejected his invitation to have me not collab with him. So he frames maturity and mutual respect not as age or autonomy, but as compliance to what he wants me to do. That's not weird. You know what else isn't weird? That after calling me an immature childish 7th grader, he thought it'd be so funny and very appropriate to joke about becoming enemies to lovers with me and getting matching tattoos. Isn't that so funny? He should do stand-up. After I watched this video, I commented that I still refused his offer because I felt like the only people who really cared about this was me and him. He's allowed to have his opinions and never improve as a person, but I am also allowed to think that he's still weird for it. And that was as deep as this was supposed to go. Some of the replies I received under that comment kept saying that I should throw him a bone and come up with a way to defend myself because refusing just looks bad on me in the long term. In case I didn't make it obvious before, the reason I refused his invite that he and his audience seem to have insisted I say yes to is because I already have all the information I needed. He's been extremely clear in his public posts, comments, and responses about how he thinks and how he behaves. Right before inviting me to ask him questions and or to go interview him, he lets out a little Freudian slip that he believes that he can make me look bad, but then corrects himself to say that he can make me happy. After those 10 instances of him inviting me to let him talk over me, he ends his video by calling my silly doodles of when I was mocking his polls crappy, which I'm honestly shocked that he took enough offense over my polls that he was willing to call them crappy, but also calls me a childish version of crazy. That's what he chose to end on. I'm not going to pretend that any conversation I have with him would be anything other than unproductive and cheap, and I should be allowed to decline that sort of engagement without being coerced by someone who called me an immature, depressed, mentally ill 7th grader that's also apparently a bad journalist. From an objective level, if his goal from the start was effective communication, since he says that he's supposedly open to conversations, or if it was even just good faith criticism, he failed with a negative score. In fact, even though my original video was intentionally restrained and focused on observable behavior, I could have produced a more rigorous critique of my own video than he managed to offer. For instance, I could have centered the discussion on far more substantive material that he's publicly put out, so I think it's fair to say that some points I raised were not the most consequential. I'm most regretful about the fact that I didn't make it clear that I wasn't calling him since he does have enough shame to not admit that he'd go lower if the law permitted so, because even though he doesn't see a gap between a 34-year-old and an 18-year-old, I'm sure he sees one between a 33-year-old and a 17-year-old, so I apologize that I influenced my viewers to use such strong language. In the past, I've said that when we call non-predators files for suspicious behavior, people who don't care about get to weaponize the buzzword and end up hurting marginalized people first over real. These kinds of people exploit legal gray areas to maintain emotional or social control over younger partners. But when we misuse words like file or treat any age gap as paraphilic, the actual problem goes unnoticed. You don't have to be a pedophile to be manipulative, coercive, or predatory, and misusing that word makes it so easy for people to say, it's not pedophilia, it's legal. Yes, you're right, it is legal, but the legality is not what we're worried about though, because even if the binary age wasn't a factor, the man in my story still tried to establish an emotional, intellectual, and social power imbalance between us, which is why I didn't use the specific words or predator. But I also acknowledge that I could have been more clear to prevent that misinterpretation, and I will try to be more explicit about that sort of thing in the future. However, I've also received some extra criticism from his audience saying that I didn't give him any solutions to my grievances, but I feel like that just misunderstands both the purpose of my video and how solutions work in the first place. A solution only exists if the person in question is willing to reconsider their underlying beliefs. If those beliefs remain unchanged, no practical solution follows from anything I said. And more importantly, I feel like I shouldn't need to spell out basic decency to a grown adult that considers himself mature for my critique to be valid. There is truly nothing wrong with giving criticism if done right, just like how there's nothing wrong with responding to criticism or even just different viewpoints if you do it right. I am not faulting him for the fact that he responded with multiple comments, posts, or even an entire video, and I truly don't think he's obsessed or anything along those lines, since I think it's just online banter. But if you're planning to respond to it publicly in front of your audience and you want to look mature in the process, you have to acknowledge the criticism on a deeper level that adds something new to the conversation. Not just, can you believe that she didn't talk to me about approving this video first? That means addressing the actual points, adding something new to the discussion, clarifying misunderstandings without defensiveness, and expanding your reasonings rather than repeating prior talking points. There is a great possibility that the only reason why my single mediocre comment ratioed his entire video was purely because his response lacked substance or even entertainment. There are some people that believe that you shouldn't ever respond to criticism online because they can harm your mental. Most times it's just mindless hate, and if you engage with it poorly, it can look bad for you and your brand. And those are valid reasons, but I don't think that means that you can't respond to criticism at all. Criticism is one of the few external feedback mechanisms that allows a person to identify blind spots they cannot see on their own. When it's specific good faith and grounded in observable behavior, responding to it can clarify intent, correct mistakes, and demonstrate growth. Silence is not maturity by default, it's just neutral. Whether a response is productive depends on how and why it's made. For an audience, a measure or even just a lighthearted, funny response can show accountability and self-awareness as well, which can be a positive for the creator. But if you treat criticism as an attack or trashing and continuously respond by trashing the other person, then it can show insecurities and defensiveness. When someone repeatedly replies without engaging with the substance of the critique, it suggests that their goal is just self-validation. In my own case, I receive criticism regularly, and sometimes I choose to respond publicly because it allows me to think through my positions, articulate it more clearly, and sometimes just lets me get it out of my system to allow me to move on. If I choose to internalize valid criticism, then it can help me improve myself or my thought process too. But as a public creator, I don't get to choose who gets to criticize me and how loud they are about it. There were a couple people saying that me criticizing this creator was for pure clout and attention, but calling criticism attention seeking is just a very convenient way to avoid engaging with the content of the critique itself. Criticism, by definition, is not inherently antagonistic. Whether my critique is valid has nothing to do with the size of his or my platform or the attention it might bring me, and everything to do with whether the points I raised are accurate and logically sound. But I don't know, that's just me. Laters. I thought so.